Welcome to 5% Radio, where it's all about learning like no one else today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. Please be sure to share and subscribe. Hello and welcome back to the 5% Radio podcast. Today is actually a very special episode. It's episode number 53, and I want to be going through, I created the mindset training quite a while back when I had a job working at a clinic and I was doing weight loss coaching and some other stuff. And I created this special training because I kept going through all these mindset concepts with the clients, and the ones that I taught this to did the best. The ones that didn't really grasp this ended up not really keeping their results in the program. So people would do great while they were on the program, while they had the food list, while they had the accountability, but because nothing changed internally, nothing really changed externally long-term for them. So I want to start off by saying this is a training that I recorded a long time ago. I kept the slides. I did not want to use the audio from the exact same training because there were some references to weight loss and things like that, but I did keep the slides of that original training, and I will probably post that at some point on YouTube. If so, I'll put that link in the description of this podcast episode, but I wanted to use those same exact slides and then also sprinkle in some of the information that I've learned since then from some of the other books and the other just audio recordings, audio books, interviews, and things like that I've exposed myself to over the years since then. But mindset has absolutely changed pretty much everything in my life since I really began learning about it. It took me from being someone who was depressed and at one point suicidal in my life to someone who was now happy and joyful and no longer dealt with depression, no longer dealt with any of that stuff, didn't really have days where I felt down, completely changed my life. It was literally as if someone turned the lights on for the first time in my life when I began to understand these concepts. So that being said, let's dive into Mindset 101, Part 1, and let's start with talking about taking responsibility. Because here's the first concept I want you to understand. You cannot change what you will not accept responsibility for. So this comes into the perspective of fault versus responsibility, meaning it's someone else's fault. You can look at it that way. You can point outside yourself and say it's an externality, it's someone else's fault. Or you can begin to look in the mirror and say, how is this my responsibility? Even if you think, man, there's nothing that I can do to fix this. Well, if it's not your fault, then you don't have a solution, is one way to put it. So if I can't take responsibility over something, I really have no power to change it. So number one, if you're looking at mindset as a whole, anything that does not start with a change in your mindset is not going to be a long-term change. So I have to begin taking responsibility because I can't change things that are outside of me. I can't change things if I say, well, it's this person's fault, or it's the fault of this situation, or it's the fault of this organization. I have to learn to take responsibility before I can do anything else. Placing blame on any externalities, anyone or anything outside yourself is giving away any and all ability and power to change the situation. You will be able to predict and control your results in any given area only to the extent that you are willing to accept responsibility. So learn to ask yourself this question. How can I take responsibility for this? Not just what can I take responsibility for, but the outcome that you are unhappy with, the circumstance that is going on currently in any area at any time. How can I take responsibility for this? One more thing to keep in mind when it comes to mindset is that we become what we think about. Earl Nightingale said this on his recording, The Strangest Secret, that you can find on YouTube. We become what we think about. So if I think in terms of blank, and I become what I think about, I will begin to act out blank in all areas of my life. A good example of this is if I think in terms of a person who is lazy, then I will begin to become lazy. I will begin to act that out in all areas of my life. If I begin to think in terms of someone who is successful, and I actually, when I first began this journey of working on my mindset, of working on, man, what would it be like to be positive? Working on what would it be like? I'm not positive now, but if I was, I'm not successful now, but if I was, I don't have good finances now, but if I did, what would a person who's positive, what would they think about this? How would they view the situation? And I would literally tell myself, okay, I'm not positive now. I'm pretty negative now. This is when I was first dealing with these things. So I would address the truth. I would address the brutal reality of, I'm not positive now, but if I was, how would I think about this? And just remember that if I think in terms of fill in the blank, and I become what I think about, I will begin to act out of whatever I'm thinking about in all areas of my life. What is inside will always create what is outside. This is known as the law of harvest, meaning the seeds that you plant equal the fruit that you bear. So why do we become what we think about? How does that actually work? Well, here's the deal, and I talked about this in episode 1 of this podcast, and I've referenced it a couple times, but I'm really going to deep dive this concept right now. But thoughts lead to feelings. Feelings lead to actions. actions lead to results, and results lead to more thoughts, which lead to more feelings, which lead to more actions. So here's really how this works. If you could picture 4 circles, on the very left is thoughts, at the top is feelings, on the very right is actions, and then at the very bottom is results. And there's just these arrows going from thoughts to feelings to actions to results back to thoughts. So here's the deal. Out of results, I talked about we think more thoughts. We form stories. In other words, we have interpretation. So if you were to play the game of telephone, by the time it goes from the first person to the last person, the message is totally different. I mean, has anyone ever played telephone and it actually stayed the same? Because I've never seen it in my life. It always ends up being something completely just laughably like, oh my gosh, like how did they get that? It's so different. But see, when you go through the thoughts, feelings, actions, results loop, the next thing out of those results is we end up telling ourselves stories. And I say stories because it's the way that we interpret something. Just as a little kid will see something and they'll tell a completely different story than an adult would, it is a story, it is interpretation, it is perspective. Stories are the self-talk, meaning what goes on in our head that we have about our current results created by previous thinking. And these stories, positive or negative, start a whole new cycle of thoughts, feelings, actions, results to either produce new results or the same old, same old. And here's the deal. When I tell stories, when I interpret something, so when I have an event that happens, if you want to think thoughts, feelings, actions, results, if you want to change that word results to events, meaning something happened, I can go one of 2 ways. And if you watch the training on YouTube that I'll put in the link in the description, I can go to the left of, if there's a fork in the road of blame and disempowering, or I can go to responsibility. How is this my fault? What can I fix? How can I take control over this? Which is empowerment. And if I go to blame and disempowerment, meaning I'm pointing to externalities and I'm thinking negatively and I'm thinking in ways that take all of my ability to change the situation, they take that away from me. They say, well, it's this person's fault. It's that. I could never fix this. I was born this way. I'm just this type of person. We grew up in this area. Those thoughts lead to the same old loops, the same old thoughts, the same old feelings, the same old results. But on the other hand, you contrast that. If I take responsibility, if I choose to empower myself with my thoughts, and I'm not talking about anything woo-woo or weird or, empower yourself and the universe and none of that garbage, but empowering language says, I can, I will, this is my fault, my responsibility, I will fix this. How can I fix this? How can I change this? See, successful people who have good mindsets view things as challenges instead of problems. Challenges have solutions. Problems are just circumstances. New thoughts of empowerment, responsibility will lead to new feelings, which will lead to new results. So how do we actually change the stories that we tell ourselves so we can begin to take responsibility and move towards our goals, move towards the things we want, move in the direction that we actually want to go rather than just being stuck in the same old patterns? Well, Stephen Covey talked about in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He said this, he said, between stimulus and response, there is choice. In other words, between what happens and how you actually choose to respond to what happens, there's a choice. And another way to put this is event, interpretation, outcome. In other words, something happened. I had a perspective on that situation, and that determines the outcome. Event, interpretation, outcome. Or as Stephen Covey said, between stimulus and response, there is choice. The event is the stimulus. The response is the outcome. The interpretation, which begins the thoughts, feelings, actions, results loop, is the thoughts equal feelings. So my interpretation, my choice, as Stephen Covey said, is the thoughts that lead to feelings that will always lead to the outcome, or as Stephen Covey called it, the response. And another great way to look at this is, how do we actually begin to change the choice we make? Because that's really the question. If you look at CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, really all that is, so cognitive, being aware of, so I'm thinking about, behavioral, how I'm acting, therapy. In other words, let's stop and think about how you're acting and then break that down and we'll begin to correct some things. Cognitive behavioral therapy. It's one of the most, to me, it's one of the most fascinating subjects when it comes to counseling, psychology, anything else, because if you begin to read some of those materials and watch events on cognitive behavioral therapy, not events, watch videos, it's very, very, very basic stuff, but basically it's just saying, hey, mentally, look in the mirror. Why do I do what I do? Why am I acting the way I'm acting? Why did I say what I just said? Let's go through some things and really begin to be aware of what we're doing, because awareness is the first phase of change. I cannot change something that I'm not currently aware of. I've got to become aware of my activity. I'm reading a book right now by Shad Helmstetter. He wrote the book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. Weird title, but phenomenal book. And he's a neurolinguistics, or not neurolinguistics, sorry. He's a neuroscientist, but he studies how the brain works. And I'm reading a book right now, and it's literally on neuroplasticity, which sounds super fancy, but basically it's just on the brain's ability to change and rewire itself and learn new things. You know, the whole, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, actually, yes, you can. Your brain continually rewires itself over time, which is why you change as a person over time, unless you continue to do the same things, hang out with the same people, live in the same area, watch the same stuff, listen to the same stuff. Anything that happens begins to rewire your brain as soon as it begins to happen, if you do it enough times with repetition, with emotion, with intention. But one of the things he talks about is just becoming aware, just mindfulness, just becoming aware of the thoughts you're thinking, of the way you act, of the things going on beneath the surface. If you begin to become aware of that, that's the first phase of change, is awareness. So how do we actually change the choices that we make? How do we learn to interpret events positively instead of negatively? Well, first things first, we have to actually practice becoming aware. And when I say practice becoming aware, what I really mean is just listening to the thoughts that go on. And I'll teach you in just a second how to actually stop those thoughts and replace them, and more or less, like, I guess the word would be like correct or rebuke, kind of to, hey, that's wrong. We're not going to do that. I'll teach you how to do that with your own mind. But first things first, you have to actually become aware. You have to be listening for it. And I don't know if you've ever been in your house and maybe your spouse or your friend or someone that was there with you heard something that you didn't hear because they were being quiet and you were talking, and they're like, shh, listen. That's what I'm challenging you to do right now with your thoughts, is every day when you wake up, just tell yourself mentally, shh, listen, and listen to the things that go on in your head. So moving on, you have to understand that thinking is a form of habit. Our habits come out of our thoughts, but thinking itself is a form of habit. All habits, good or bad, intentional, unintentional, are learned. Whatever's learned can be unlearned. You have learned how to do a lot of different things in your life. Some of those things you've learned how to do incorrectly. Is it a pain in the butt? Is it harder to unlearn something than it is to learn something new? Absolutely. Yes, it is. But can it be done? The answer is yes. So think about this. If thinking is a form of habit, how are habits formed? Well, choices times time equals habit, meaning an action repeated enough becomes a habit. If I do something once, it's a one-off thing. If I do it twice, it's becoming a pattern. If I do it 3 times, it's on its way to becoming a habit. So if you have thought a thought once, and then you got rid of it, which is unlikely, but you thought it once, you got rid of it, not a big deal. You thought it twice. If you've thought it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, man, that is on its way to becoming just cemented in your head. And your brain is pretty much getting the signal of, okay, he is feeding this to us repeatedly. He probably wants us to keep this information and use it for later. Think about this, and I know this is going to sound wild, but your brain literally gets tiny grooves in it whenever you learn something new or do something repeatedly. These grooves are called neural pathways. They're a series of basically just connected neurons that allow a signal to go from one part of your brain to the other. And there's actually there's a saying, wired together, fired together, or another way to look at it, fired together, wired together. So you can either say WTFT or FTWT. So whichever one of those you want to take a side on. But basically, the more times you do something, the better your brain gets at doing that thing repeatedly. So your brain is all about efficiencies, meaning if I've done it once and I've done it twice and my brain realizes, hey, this is a habit. Imagine if you actually had to think about the amount of things that you do every single day. Imagine if you had to be 100% aware, as if it was your first time, thinking about texting, thinking about doing your job, running your business, thinking about talking, thinking about walking, thinking about reaching down to tie your shoes, thinking about packing your lunch, thinking about making your breakfast, thinking about pouring the coffee. Imagine if you watch a little kid and they're trying to learn something, you can tell, man, their brain is like in overdrive. Their brain's trying to work so hard just to learn those things. Imagine if everything in your life was that way. You would never have time to do anything. You would never be able to think about anything other than what you were doing at that exact moment. But your brain, because you do things again, choices, meaning I did something, times time equals habit. I did something enough, I repeated it enough times that it became a habit. So little things like driving, tying your shoes, talking on the phone while you're driving, texting, hopefully not texting while you're driving. Making a meal, your brain learns, okay, I've done this enough that I need to put this on autopilot for fill in the blank, whatever your name is. I need to put this on autopilot for John so he can continue to do other things, so he's not having to basically act like he's relearning this every single day. Think about just the amount of conscious thoughts. I heard a speaker say this one time, the amount of conscious thoughts that would be required for you to go from picking something up on the floor, so bending over, picking it up, and bringing it to the countertop, or picking it up and putting it in your mouth. Like, just using your fork at the dinner table, the amount of conscious thoughts that your brain would have to go through of telling, okay, move this muscle, relax this, contract this, relax this, okay, go ahead and turn this way and apply pressure here, but not too much. Like, it would be ridiculous. So think of these little pathways in your brain as basically efficiency. So they're your brain trying to connect things that are already working together. So these pathways, think of these as basically little roads in your brain. And the more you travel down a certain road, the stronger the connection in your brain becomes, and the more reinforced that habit becomes. So basically these grooves essentially become your default behavior, requiring less and less, little to no effort to execute. So forming a new habit requires deliberate, consistent repetition. So this is really a struggle at the beginning. It gets a little easier over time if you stay consistent, and eventually becomes second nature, becomes a habit. So think about this. I want you to picture your brain in whatever area you're trying to change. So think of it as an open field. So if I'm trying to change the way that I view money, and I've never really worked on that, I already have a set of beliefs, I already have a series of habits around this area, but I want to form something new. So I do currently have ruts, grooves, pathways, little roads in my brain. I already have those because these neurons wired together, fired together, wired together. They've worked together in the past. They've worked in unison in the past on specific things. They know exactly what I do, and the way that the book that I'm reading right now describes it is basically you make decisions at the unconscious or subconscious level based on what you've done in the past. So again, I talked about becoming aware. Now that I'm aware, this new habit is basically like a field. Just picture like a cornfield or a wheat field. So there's nothing there. And the first time I go through that, there might be a track kind of where I went through. You might be able to see some things moved aside. Like if I drove through a cornfield, there would be noticeable damage to the corn. There would be a rut, in other words, a groove, a little road, a pathway where I had gone through. But long term, it wouldn't really do anything. It would go right back. So picture like a field and then that going to like a 2-track. We've all seen this where there's ruts. There's some spots where things have been killed because it's been driven over and over again. But outside of those 2 ruts where the tires go, everything else in the field is normal. So it's not really a road yet, but it's been traveled a little bit more than one time through the field. Now, if that gets used repeatedly, that then becomes basically a dirt road. So I want you to picture a field with a road going through the middle of it. Now, again, still not like a serious road, but it's working. It's becoming more of a legitimate road. Like I could actually drive past this now and realize, oh, that's there. Meaning it's not quite as hard as doing it the first time was, but it's not fully a habit yet. Next, that road gets paved, becomes a country road, maybe, chipped and sealed. If you don't live in the country, you have no clue what that means, but it's basically just it's one step up from a gravel road, not quite a regular paved road that you'd see in town. Then it becomes a 2-lane road, maybe with a dotted line or a double yellow line. Then it becomes maybe a 3-lane, highway. Then it becomes an interstate. Then it becomes, the 405 in California, because I've done that habit over and over and over and over, and I've thought those thoughts over and over and over and over and over again. Now understand, this can be used to the positive or the negative. Changing your thinking from negative, disempowering, it's someone else's fault, blame, it's external, I can't do anything about it, to positive is just like taking that field and turning it into the 405. The 405, and if you've never looked that up in California, look up the 405 in California. It's massive, and there's so many cars that go on that thing all the time. But the 405 represents your current thinking, your current patterns, the things you've done over and over and over again. Whether you want to change them or if you want to keep them, that's your current thinking, because it's been reinforced with repetition, emotion, intention, focus over and over and over. In this field represents the new pattern thinkings that you're going to create, that you want to create. So now that we understand how these things are formed, now that we understand that I have to become aware of my thinking, now that we understand the thoughts, feelings, actions, results, and those results lead to stories, interpretations, perspectives that I can make empowering and positive or negative and disempowering. How can we actually become more aware of our current habits of thinking? It's simple. Just start listening to your current thinking. We call this inner dialogue or self-talk. It's the thoughts you think to yourself. And I know a lot of people right now, I've said this before on the podcast, you're like, oh, I don't talk to myself. I don't do any of that stuff. Only weirdos do that. But unless you verbalize that out loud to someone else, then you're talking to yourself. Now, if you drove down the road with someone and you told them, I don't talk to myself, that's weird. Great. But if you're driving down the road by yourself and you said out loud, Jesse, I don't talk to myself, that's even more weird than talking to yourself in your head. But it's all the same. It's all self-talk. It was something that started in your head, and eventually it'll come out. And if you begin to listen to this, one of the things that they talk about actually is a way to improve your reading faster is to discontinue or to stop what's called sub-vocalization, meaning I'm saying the words in my head as I'm reading them. It slows down your reading, but you're still thinking those thoughts. It's the same thing here. I'm thinking something, but I haven't actually said it out loud, but it's still very, very, very powerful. It's less powerful than if I said it out loud and I hear myself, but it's still going on in my head. So ask yourself this question. Each time you think something, learn to ask yourself the question, was that positive or negative? Because listening to your self-talk matters. And once you begin to listen to it, things begin to change. So once I'm aware of my self-talk, once I'm asking questions such as, is what I'm thinking right now, is this self-talk positive or negative, good or bad? Is it pulling me to where I want to go? Is it pushing me forward or pulling me backwards? Is it making me feel like I'm empowered or making me feel like I'm disempowered, making me feel powerless? Is it making me feel belief and confidence, or is it tearing me down? If my best friend talked to me this way, would they be my best friend? Is this a thought that I want to keep? Is this a thought that I want to be true? Because remember this, the choice that we talked about earlier between stimulus and response, the event, interpretation, outcome, that whole thing that we talked about, the choice you make there is dictated by your self-talk. The thoughts you think actually end up creating the outcome or the response in that situation. If your self-talk is negative, you'll make poor choices because you'll feel disempowered and unable to change things in whatever area you're looking to change. If your self-talk is positive, you'll make good choices because you feel empowered and you're able to change things in your mind. There's a belief system there that based on my self-talk, you can learn your beliefs. If your self-talk is consistently negative, then you probably have a low self-image, you probably don't have the greatest confidence, and you're probably not moving on in the ways that you want to because your self-talk, the person who's basically riding shotgun all the time in your life, is telling you all kinds of garbage that if I tell you it enough, you'll eventually think it's true. And I give this analogy, but if someone woke up every single day and the first thing they heard for 30 minutes straight was what a loser they were, how unattractive they were, how their life's going nowhere, they mess everything up, no one likes them, they're never going to amount to anything, just imagine the first 30 minutes of your day just being absolute toxic garbage in your brain. What do you think, even if that person right now is successful, they're beautiful, they're in great shape, they're doing exactly what they want to do, they're happy, they're joyful, everyone loves them, people love to be around them, they make wonderful choices, they're known for being great at what they do. What do you think would happen to that person's brain if this happened every single day? What do you think would happen to their life? 30 minutes a day. They're told all of these terrible things. Do you think eventually they would begin to believe that? Because I can tell you right now that we're raising a little kid. And if I told him every single day how smart he was, how capable, how confident he should be, how much he can do, and man, you're so gifted, you're so talented, and you work so hard. If I told him all those things, man, he's going to grow up to be great, to believe in himself, to think, man, I can do something with my life. But if I call him names, if I yell at him, if I smacked him around, if I did all those kind of things that a lot of people do to their kids, and they tell them they're a pain in the butt and they're this and they're that. I've heard people swearing at their kids that aren't even 2 years old yet. Oh, he's such a fill in the blank, and I'm like, dude, your kid's not even 2, and you're telling him, like, he's going to turn into exactly what you're telling him, because again, we become what we think about. And if I say that often enough, again, the voice doesn't have to be there telling me. Eventually, I begin to tell myself. So understanding your self-talk is really just understanding your life's narrator. The silent voice in the background. I want you to picture Morgan Freeman in your head, and everyone gets to hear what your Morgan Freeman is telling you. So if your boss says, hey, I've got a new project for you, or if you're like, you know what, you tell a friend, man, I'd really like to start a business this year. What are the thoughts behind that? Man, you can't start a business. You're this and you're that. Remember this time? Remember when you failed here? And what would that Morgan Freeman voice be saying? Would you want other people to hear that? Because understanding your self-talk is really understanding that your life has a narrator and it's happening in your brain all the time. There are two voices in your head. The brain works just like the organizational process in a library. There's a positive teller and there's a negative teller. There's a positive person who is narrating your life and there's a negative narrator. Now, as input, meaning a new event comes in, it goes through a classification process. In other words, it gets interpreted. Event, interpretation, outcome, stimulus, response, choice. That choice, the label that you stick on that, whether it was positive or negative, if it was embarrassing, if it built confidence, if it made you believe in yourself, if it tore you down, made you feel like a winner, made you feel like a loser, made you feel fat, skinny, ugly, pretty, whatever that was, that classification process where it gets labeled and stored along with other items, I want you to think about there's a little librarian, there's a teller in your head, that narrator, that person who manages your self-talk. His job is to tell you, based on what just happened, was it good or bad? Did it make you feel like you can win or lose? And here's kind of how this works. The classification process labels, and I'm breaking this down in the most layman terms, like hopefully this is understandable way that I can, but the classification process labels and organizes things based 100% not on what actually happened, not on what others thought happened, not on the perspective of anything else other than your brain's natural default. It gets labeled and classified, and the view that is taken on that situation is 100% based on your lens, how you view life, the self-talk habits you have, the thinking that you've done over and over and over and over again. So if you normally have negative thoughts, most inputs are more than likely labeled negatively. There's a friend that I'm thinking of right now, and every time something happens in their life, they look for the way that they can find a negative in it. They look for, man, this person doesn't like me. Well, if they had done this, they would like me, but because they don't like me, they did this. That same situation could happen to someone else. So for example, hey, can you hang out Monday evening? And, oh, no, I'm busy. And that person thinks, oh, well, they're not busy. They don't want to hang out with me because I'm a loser. Who would want to hang out with me? No one likes me. They're not even really my friend. They probably didn't even want to text me back. I'm probably bothering them right now. Why did I ask? I'm so stupid. I'm such an idiot. Why did I even ask them if they want to hang out? No one wants to be around me. People can't stand you. What are you thinking? And then they place that in their filing cabinet as one more thing that they got rejected as. And then next time something happens, they're like, oh, no, man, I remember last time I asked, they rejected me because they can't stand me. Versus saying, you know what? I'm glad they can't hang out Monday evening because I actually, I wanted time with my family. And after I fired off that text message, I was really thinking about, man, it'd be great to have time with our little girls and, our boy and my husband and I haven't had one-on-one time together. Maybe we can have a movie night. And, I'm glad that they're putting their family first, their work first, whatever that is, because I know they've got priorities. They want to move on in their life. It has nothing to do with me, but man, I'm proud of them for telling me they weren't available because, man, I could have guilt-tripped them into doing it, but I know they had priorities. And man, that's such a great friend to be honest with me and not make excuses and just tell me see, that's a positive voice. That's healthy self-talk. But again, choices times time, meaning repetition equals habit. So John D. LeMay said this. He said, take me, train me, be firm with me, and I will place the world at your feet. Be easy with me, and I will destroy you. Who am I? I am habit. Lo Tzu said this, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. So this does conclude Mindset 101 Part 1. Next, I'll be going into Mindset 101 Part 2, or if you'd like to kind of consider it Mindset 202 Part 1, you could do that. But it's going to be labeled Mindset 101 Part 2. These would be two episodes that I would definitely go back and listen to over and over and over again. Also, if you would like the book list of the things that I've read that have really kind of opened my eyes to the mindset thing. I know you can find stuff on YouTube, but here's the deal. A lot of the stuff you find on YouTube is either super nerdy, like just way like it's some neuroscientist and he's like, and there's some great content, but he's diving into all this different stuff and it's 30 minutes long and you're like, man, I understood at least 30 seconds of that. Like if you want to read some material that is just going to be straightforward, here's what you need, here's how to actually understand this. Here's these different concepts. Here's how they kind of marry together. I'll put all the books that I've read that have to do with this subject down in the description of the show. And I'll probably not update this over time, but I will put the ones that I have read to date, which is close to a dozen on this topic. That's not a brag. It's something that I find fascinating. It's something that has absolutely changed my life, and I'm continually burdened to learn more about this, because if it changed my life, I want to make sure that I can pass on as much of that knowledge as I possibly can in the most condensed, easy to understand, layman's terms way that's available. So anyway, that being said, the next episode will be Mindset 101 Part 1. And lastly, there's a book that I have actually begun to work on. I will finish it later on down the road once I've achieved some pretty large goals. But it's going to be about how I actually made the switch from living a negative, just downtrodden, not happy, not joyful, not confident, not belief inspiring, none of that. I wasn't living that way, and how I made the switch, how I was able to beat depression, how I was able to actually begin chasing goals and achieve some large things in my life. But I don't want to write that book until I've actually achieved those things, because how many times have you heard of someone writing a book and then they actually got successful because they wrote and sold the book? So I don't want to be the guy that got successful because he sold books on how he became successful. I think that's garbage. Mentioned that before. But anyway, I'm not going to name the title of the book, but I am working on something. I've already got probably roughly 60 to 70% of it done, just in the initial rough draft that I've already rough drafted 4 times. But I've already got about 70% of that done, and I'm extremely excited to finish that, but I'm not going to finish that work until I'm completely financially free and well into wealth, because I want to make sure that the lessons that I'm teaching are the lessons that I've learned. I would hate to write something and then look back and be like, you know what, I learned more after that. That was not 100% accurate. And then someone bought that and acted as if it were true. So I'll finish that eventually. Whenever I do, I will announce that on the show. But anyway, for now, I'll talk to you in the next episode, episode number 54. I will put the bibliography of what I've read so far on this topic in the show notes, and I will see you guys in the next episode.